Hello, I'm Ara Sarafian, the Executive Director of the Gomidas Institute, based in London, UK. Welcome to today's presentation by Osik Moses on German archival records related to Soghomon Tehlirian and the assassination of Talaat Pasha in Berlin on 15th of March, 1921. Talaat was a former Ottoman Minister of Interior and the chief architect of the Armenian genocide, while Tehlirian was one of Talaat's surviving victims who avenged the murder of over 80 members of his family in Yerzinga, Erzincan in Ottoman Armenia. However, Talaat's assassination was not simply carried out by an individual, Soghomon Tehlirian. It was part of a political assassination program organized by the Armenian Revolutionary Federation in the aftermath of World War I. Talaat was the first target in this campaign, and his demise became one of the great assassinations of the 20th century. Recently, the Gomidas Institute published the English translation of Tehlirian's memoir, Talaat Assassination, though many details of this event remain shrouded in mystery. Hence the importance of alternative sources such as German records. Today's presentation, which was pre-recorded with Osik Moses, focuses on German police, judicial, and other records related to the killing, as well as the arrest, trial, and release of Tehlirian a few months later in June 1921. Osik Moses is an independent researcher trained in oral history, archival documentation, and genocide studies, and she will be part of a panel discussion that will follow her presentation. She will be joined by Dr. Carla Garapedian, a successful filmmaker with specialist knowledge of Soghomon Tehlirian, as well as Bedo Demirdjian, who translated and annotated Tehlirian's memoir in English. All panelists, needless to say, have specialist knowledge of today's topic of discussion. So I'll start the pre-recorded presentation, and then we'll go into the discussion afterwards.
Hello. As the title of my presentation shows, today I will talk about some of the documents I found on Tehlirian in the German archives. What I present here is only a very tiny portion of what I found, which can be categorized, organized in 4 categories: the arrest, the pre-trial investigation, what went on during the trial, and what happened after the trial. As you can also see, at each stage, the document shows what was going on in Germany and abroad, and also how the public reacted to the event. The third slide shows the form that was filled out when Tehlirian was transferred to the police. This is one of the earliest mentions of what was going on there. So it says that the person is a student from Persia, Salmas, who killed a man in front of the house number 17 and injured the lady who was walking with the man. Basically what we know from different books and newspapers. This page continues with the report, adds that at 11:15 a.m. a Turkish national was shot in the back of his head with a parabolon pistol. The bullet exited the left eye. After carrying out his deed, the perpetrator threw away his pistol and ran away, but the passers-by caught him and handed him over to the police. And also it adds that the pistol has also been confiscated. And again, continues that the person was shot, fell down immediately, and lost a lot of blood. Dr. Otto Schloss pronounced him dead. Also, at the end, mentions that the corpse has been transferred to the city morgue. This is a list of the items that were found in Talaat's pocket, and a few of the items here, for example, a gold matchbox, a watch, a fountain pen case, etc. And at the bottom of this at the back of the document, this list, it says that these items were picked up by Talaat's wife on a day later, on March 16. These are actually pieces of papers that are still in the archive, again found in Talaat's pockets, but were not handed over to his wife. So a few, these black spots actually are blood stains. When I first went to German archives, I could see the originals, and you can see these blood stains. Nowadays they give you a list, and also I think you can also only look at the scans on the computer. The few things are interesting about the contents of these papers. One is that the name Ali Sai Bey, in most cases it's written Ali Salih Bey. When it's written that way, I didn't correct the transcription. Underneath it says the murdered. Again, another interesting thing is a ticket in Italian, and it's dated January 11th, and Ali Sai Bey, again here it's written on the paper, and Italy, Rome. And one other important piece of information here is reference to town of Hamm near Dortmund. And if you have read, if you know from Aubrey Herbert, the British intelligence officer, in his book, he writes that he met with Talaat in this town on February 26, 1921. I chose this one because Georg Galusian was there on the second day to interpret Tehlirian's confession, and as an interpreter he was there. And Tehlirian confesses that he had planned to kill Talaat way in advance and came to Berlin both for the purpose of studying and also finding Talaat. And as we see here, we see Tehlirian's signature, but not Galusian. And we know that during the trial, this helped Tehlirian with retracting his confession. This is the transcription of what he said of that confession. This document shows, although we know that Ernst Jeck claimed to have been the first person to identify Talaat because he had an appointment with him, but again here, Behauddin Shakir, we can see his signature. He goes to city morgue and identifies the corpse as Talaat. During the pretrial investigation, this is a few of documents. Tehlirian, this one is undated, probably a part of another document, the continuation. It mentions that Tehlirian suffers from epileptic attacks, and until then he lived on 4,800 Turkish pounds he found in his parents' house in Erzincan. And I found this is the first document that I found that mentions the mental state of Tehlirian, but the letter was written on the 29th, but it refers to everything that went on the 16th, 17th, and the 21st of March. So this recapping of the investigation that went on those days. And here the person writes that because although Tehlirian was diagnosed with serious mental illness, he doesn't qualify for paragraph 51. Paragraph 51 says that the person with mental disturbances does not qualify for death penalty. And here it says he doesn't qualify for paragraph 91, which basically means he can be charged with the punishment would be death penalty if he's convicted. Here I chose these documents and also transcription of these documents were sent to the Foreign Office. You can see the transcription over there, but I just chose this one. Tehlirian, these are telegrams from Boston Armenian Association appealing to the Ministry of Justice, and one from Addis Ababa to send to President Ebert and pleading on behalf of Tehlirian and Armenians in general. I think these documents are relevant because this one shows that on May 26, Kurt Niemeyer was added to the Defense Council as the third member. But here, between March 30 and April 22, Osik Kohn tried to get permission to visit Tehlirian and speak with him, as I wrote here. And he writes that Mr. Garapedian from Armenian Club asked him to represent Tehlirian. The request was not granted. So Osik Kohn was a Jewish lawyer and a member of the German parliament. According to documents, he asked for permission to see Tehlirian, but the complaints he filed with the Justice Ministry afterwards show that he never was granted permission. We know that Tehlirian writes in his prison diary that someone went to see him, but because he didn't know him, he refused his offer for representation. This might be Osik Kohn or another person, but from these documents, I could not determine whether there was another lawyer who was attempting to talk to Tehlirian. This is a document from Political Archives of the Foreign Office, which also Tessa Hoffman, in one of her earliest articles, when she found the documents, he mentions this document, and she translates, and she translates to mammoth political trial, which can also be translated as spectacular political trial. In the German original, it says Monsterprozess. It says, the document says, I'm reading Tessa Hoffman's translation, it is to be feared that the coming trial by jury of the Armenian who assassinated the former Turkish Grand Vizier Talaat Pasha on March 15 of this year will escalate into a mammoth political case. Not only will it cause a lot of public concern once the numerous political questions unfold, but will also, in course of assessment, raise much controversy about the motives behind the act. We are to fear a disturbance on the public front, as well as in German-Turkish relations. And also, this document mentions that they first tried to exclude the press, but the request was not granted because they thought that it's going to raise even more suspicion. So, as I said, during the pre-trial investigation, a lot is going on in Germany, and they are just these are only a part of, only a very few of everything that that is in German archive. Again, I'm using Tessa Hoffman's translation. It says this document, as much as it was possible to read, because it shows that it was burned probably during World War II. The matter has been discussed in detail with Chief Prosecutor Golnik, who will represent the prosecution, and at a hearing scheduled on June 2nd of this year, and His Excellency Weigel from the Foreign Office and also von Thurman were from Foreign Office, both from Foreign Office were present. The importance of this document, I'm just going to go back to it later. Why this discussion with Golnik probably happened, but before doing so, I will just add this one, that von Gordon requested Consul Rösler to testify as one of the expert witnesses. In the handwritten note on this side, it says, "We probably can deny the request on the grounds that the only general questions have been raised, which don't relate directly to Talaat Pasha. For general political questions, Consul Rosla is not responsible." Also, and the author writes, "Also, I noticed that the author, meaning von Gordon, never mentions Talaat name in this document. So these are good grounds for denying the request for Consul Rosla to be present as an expert witness." As I said, the reactions, different reactions that were happening in Berlin and outside. So abroad, I just chose this one because this is a report from the political archives of the Foreign Office, which states they recap the Turkish activity in Berlin, and also at the end they write that this part that was somehow highlighted shows that the Armenians in the US have donated $10,000 for Tehlirian's legal and medical expenses, and Behaeddin Shakir is trying to prevent the court from discussing the Armenian question as a political issue. And he's also preparing, working on Talaat's memoirs, that here, as it mentions, would be published soon. Attached to this letter is a 38 pages of transcription of Talaat's memoirs, which in there he discusses the Armenian question. So during the trial, these are some of the pages of the notes that were taken during the trial. But I have to add that this is not the complete stenographic report, but only keywords that reports on the trial. I added this because press, a few of the requests from the press for admission passes, and one is from Chicago Daily News. Forbes is a German newspaper, as is obvious, and also from Daily Telegram. These representatives were present not only from these newspapers, but also from other newspapers, which I include a few of them here. Their representatives publish detailed reports of the proceedings. So it's very accurate from what goes on during the trial and what they publish in different newspapers. Again, here some of the newspaper articles, only a very small portion of it, and some of them were sent to the Foreign Ministry, which this one is from the Foreign Ministry archive. After the trial, which I noted here, a day after the trial, von Gordon requests Tehlirian's passport to be returned to him. And this is one of the official notes that mentions Tehlirian's release. And here it's Chief State Prosecutor Schweitzer files a revision, appeal against the verdict on June 10. But again, a few days later, here in this document says that the appeal was retracted. So they decide not to file a revision. Right after the trial, Golnik, from the other documents are obvious that he goes on vacation, and when he comes back and on July 15, he writes a detailed report on why he retracted his appeal for for revision. Here it says, there was no ground. One of the reasons he mentions is it was not useful because by then we filed the revision report. The Tehlirian had already left the country, so he was not there. It wouldn't make any sense. As I said, even after the trial, there are a lot of complaints going on, and this is from Mustafa Fuad, a member of Orient Club, who files the complaints, and this is also mentioned in Tessa Hoffman's article. And the most ardent opponent to the acquittal was from the Bund der Asienkämpfer, Hans Humann, and which can be translated as League of Asian Fighters or Asian Warriors. Hans Humann was one of the military officials stationed in the Ottoman Empire, and he was actually one of the influential members that working with Enver was try to convince the Ottomans to enter the war on the side of Germany. Hans Humann was also the son. He was born in Izmir. He is the son of the Carl Humann, an archaeologist who discovered Pergamon altar, which is now housed in Pergamon Museum in Berlin. And he tries very hard, gets in contact with Golnik and tries to convince him to ask the Asian fighters, these people who, whether military officials or civilians who were stationed during during the World War in Turkey, to come and testify. Based on the complaints and everything that goes on, all the letters and newspaper articles that was published here, I have an example, two examples. It seems that they were first told they can come and testify, but they went there, but they were never called on to talk. And then here, for example, Schellendorf writes that in the process, those witnesses were called who either didn't know anything what went on in Ottoman Empire, or everything that they talked about were something that they had heard, and they themselves didn't experience or see what went on. We, as the German officials that during the Armenian atrocities were there and were ready to testify, why weren't we called? They were notified from the court to come and testify, but as witnesses, but at the end they were not called. So these are one of the complaints that is made from German side, and also, as I said, from the Orient Club. This is also something related to Tehlirian's weapon. They are just internal notes that the weapon is available on 1924. If for internal use, for the police use, can be picked up, and then here it says that it's already on July 16, 1924, it was picked up, but it doesn't mention a name. It just mentions that it has been picked up. Before I finish my presentation, I would also like to talk about how one of the reasons Tehlirian's files were kept. In 1935, German police goes to Detroit, and the American police asks them what about a person who did something many years ago, and neither the German officer knows, the police know who this person is. He goes back and starts trying to find information, and finally he found the document, writes a report, and sends in this envelope with the picture of Tehlirian, and in the back it says Tehlirian, born in Pakarich on April 2nd, 1897, and sends to Detroit. And here it says on this one, it says this file should not be, all these files related to this case should not be destroyed and should be kept for training purposes. Probably training of the police officers. I'm gonna finish my presentation here. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Wow. Thank you, Osik, for that presentation. Your work is remarkable. It's thought-provoking, reflecting the complexities of assassination across a range of issues, not just Armenian, but non-Armenian, political, related German, and history, the aftermath of World War I. How much of this material was new to you when you started? How much of this type of information did you expect to find? How much was new? And what was it like working on these records at a personal level?
Actually, when I first became interested into the trial, I was at a conference with. I wasn't interested in history at all. I was teaching math and science, what I studied in Germany, and I was working in that area. And I went to a conference at UCLA, and Dr. Ovanesian mentioned something that he said, every one of you, I expect that what you have to the audience, the entire audience. So use your expertise and use it for the Armenian related issues. And then I was sitting there and thinking, what can I do? I only know German. I don't know anything about history. And then suddenly I remembered Tehlirian's case happened in Berlin. And I went, and we know Tehlirian, the songs that as kids we hear, but didn't know anything in details. And I bought his memoirs and I started reading. And when I got to the trial part, many things didn't seem right or didn't make sense to me. And I started digging, and I thought to myself, it would be better if I could talk to an attorney and ask their opinion about the trial. And I Google searched it, and I found that obviously Varkez Yeghyan, who translated the court transcription, was a lawyer. I made an appointment with him, and I went, and after speaking with him, he said, go to Berlin. And I told him, have you seen photos of Berlin after World War II? I bet there is nothing certain that survived. And he said, go to Berlin, you're gonna find materials. And I did that, and I went to Berlin. First, when Dr. Shemasian, he was my mentor, advisor, he showed me Tessa Hoffman's article, and I contacted her, and I went to see her at the Freie Universität in Berlin. She gave me the pages that she found during in East Germany before the unification. She had only photocopied the part that she was interested in. The archives had been consolidated and moved, so I had to look around to find the materials. the time that I spent there, I just walked around and then went to different archives and found these materials. I know that these are only, I went there one more time, and second time I went also to Lepsius's house in Potsdam and took a lot of pictures there. Roy was very nice to let me stay there as much as I wanted and take pictures. It was very interesting. Everyone is very friendly. At that time, most of the items were not digitized, not even the finding aids. You have to sit in the archive and go through the pages that were, written many, many years ago. Now, most of the finding aids are digitized, and also the good thing that I was able to do was at that time I could just see the original documents and look at them and then ask them after perusing them. I asked for photocopies and scans, which when I went back to the US, they were sent on CDs. But now, second time when I went, you could only see the CDs on their computers. I mean, the scans on their computers. I think maybe because of papers being deteriorated, is many people come and touch it. You know, it's not. It's not a wise thing to do. That's the downside of now that everything is digitized. It's the difficult part for me was reading the old German handwritings that have changed several times. And I was lucky enough to have a colleague. He learned. He's from Hungary, and as a child, they were using those kinds of handwritings. He helped me a lot in transcribing many of those handwritten documents. Then gradually I learned, still I have difficulty. I have to just from the context understand what is written, but you get better by doing it. So I know that this is not everything that there is. For example, we know that the Red Army, when they were retreating from German lands after World War II, took some of the materials with them. For example, Walter Rathenau, he was the Jewish prime minister of Weimar Republic who was assassinated by right-wing extremists in 1922. His papers are in Moscow. So we don't know what else is in there. So I think the young researchers have to go and see if there are other materials related to anything. So it's a really good opportunity for those to go and find more materials, or even in Germany, now that they are consolidating. I know as a trained archivist, most places that we know, they process the material in box levels. They don't go even to folder levels, not let alone to item levels. So there might be a lot that we don't know of, and there's a lot still to look for and find.
Thank you. If I may ask one more question before I allow others to do so. Have you compared any of this material to Tehlirian's memoir in terms of what his account of Talaat's assassination and the trial, and perhaps the police records or judicial records in terms of corroboration or challenging what he had to say? Is this something you've done, or has that not been a focus of yours?
Actually, the reason I wanted to know more because first I read the memoirs and the trial transcripts, and the more you get into it, the more you read. And I read everything that is written in Armenian, in German, and in English about about Tehlirian. And then these some of them are helpful, some of them help you with your further with your research. Some of them are just I don't know, grand every culture is like that. They want to uh, make their heroes and a real hero. I wanted to know who this person was and what happened. And by doing this research and finding materials, I think that was very helpful. And uh, I didn't do it on purpose, sitting there, putting them side by side and comparing them. But when you get the idea, when you read this account, and then you go to do the archival research and find something else, and then find you have to just complement everything that you find. And also the context is very important. For me, understanding the German judicial system was very important. I wanted to look at from that point of view. I wanted to understand, for example, when we are outside the country, we don't know what goes on there. For example, the argument that because the German nation was a newly created republic, they identified themselves with the Armenian newly created nation, and they don't care. They didn't care because we know that after World War One, Germany was in. They couldn't. I mean, many people, they were hardly trying to leave. So the fact that all these houses on Harderbeckstrasse were being uh, rented out to everyone, people trying to leave. They didn't care what went on, who was this, who were that. Just we had to. I wanted to understand from the newspapers accounts that you read, and from the history or whatever it is that we know that most probably that was not the case. There was something else going on. So I wanted to find out that, and not to speculate, but the political reasons were, I mean, quite obvious, because at the same time, the Leipzig trials were going on. There was the reparation talks that were going on in London. The Upper Silesian issue is still going on. So there is a lot going on in the country. We can't just look at one event as an isolated event. You have to understand the context until you understand this one particular event.
Great, thank you. Is there anything Bedo or Carla want to ask as a follow-up to what you've
well,
seen?
I would love to follow up on what Osik just said. I think that because it speaks to the wider significance of her these documents and her presentation, because I think it's so important to see these documents, to have them available, because they do speak to the wider context of the trial. And you see, even, because if you don't have that wider political context, it's not clear why, for example, the prosecutor, Golnick, is trying to stop Rossler from testifying. Why would he want to do that? And one argument would be, well, it was part of the grander general purpose to stop the trial from being what they called political. And what that meant, that was code for saying we don't want Germany's role in the Armenian genocide to become a focus of this trial. It's one thing for Turkey's role to be a focus, but if this trial lasts too long, if there are too many German expert witnesses, either from the military or the diplomatic service or missionaries who were all approved and cleared to testify in this trial, if too many of those people testified, this is the supposition, then the question of what was Germany doing in Turkey during the war, that would come into play. And the wider context is just as Osik said. You had the reparations talks going on where Germany, how much is Germany going to pay? How much more should Germany pay? And this question of the Upper Silesian plebiscite, there was territory that was in controversy or in conflict with Poland. It was being split in half. And the people in the Upper Silesia, where the German population was going to vote on whether they wanted to go over to Poland or stay in Germany. I mean, this is a matter of really national boundaries being drawn. And the last thing they wanted, this is March, the same month that the murder takes place. So questions about what was going to happen to Germany, how much Germany was going to be held responsible for the war, in and above what they were already being forced to pay under the Treaty of Versailles reparations payments. And this trial is happening with all that going on. So the documents give you little hints of that. And Tessa Hoffman's article is really kind of points the way. And the great thing that Osik has done, when I think she's being modest by saying, I had to go to different archives. Well, that's not as easy as it sounds, because you're not necessarily clear on who has what, and knowing what to ask for in these different archives. It's not as easy as it seems. So that's why I'm so happy that we have this opportunity to talk about them, but also the opportunity for others to research and learn from them.
In fact, it's important what you present, Osik, talking of the sort of the architecture of the archives, the network, shall we say, because we need that awareness in order to create the means for young researchers. I'm glad Stephen's here, to be able to go and do that work, because a lot of work can be done. The opportunities are there. The material is there. It's a question of creating the infrastructure to allow youngsters, a new generation of scholars, and to start this sort of systematic work, so that we can get to the bottom of not just Tehlirian, but the wider picture. So I think you are a path breaker, and your work is more important than perhaps even you realize. So again, thank you for being here.
Yeah, I mean, one question, and Osik, when we met and we were talking about this, that this is a rare copy of the stenographic book of the trial, the actual transcript. This is the German. It's not widely available. You can get a version of a facsimile that Tessa Hoffman produced. And the interesting thing about the stenographic version is that the telegrams that were submitted to the court are listed at the end. So now the telegrams were not allowed to be discussed at the trial, read into the record, but they were submitted as evidence. But when I saw Osik, I wanted to know, from a legal point of view, how do we view these telegrams? The fact that they were submitted and produced in the stenographic report, does that mean they were considered official evidence or not?
I can't say, Carla, for sure, because they were not admitted. I mean, they again, it was against their policy. Again, they would bring up the political aspect of the trial. They didn't want that to happen. So, and I know that in the book it says that the originals have been submitted to the court. So it means that I didn't see them. They might exist still. But yeah, I cannot comment on it because it wasn't admitted. So it wasn't discussed. So probably it would again create more questions and more demand more answers. So it was something that they didn't want to do, but they didn't want to. I mean, they wanted to prevent from any political discussion. But again, so in one of the letters from political archives of the Foreign Office, it says, we didn't have enough time to prepare counter arguments for all these pro-Armenian political issues that the defense attorney is trying to present. So that's why they're trying to exclude the audience, they're trying to exclude the press, but then again, they say, no, it's probably going to backfire, it's going to create more suspicious. What they did was shorten the days, hasten it.
Yes.
Even Friedrich Ebert, President Ebert, on 29th of April, I think, or March, I'm not quite sure about the date, there was an edict that they had to make all these, because there is lots of political assassinations going on. If you read Emil Gumbel's book, 2 years of political murder, and then he wrote another one, 4 years of political murder. There are lots of right-wing extremists and left-wing communists are killing each other on the streets of Berlin, and they're trying to hasten these trials. And when the edict comes out, it was retroactively applied to Tehlirian case as well. So it's something that they're trying to hasten it as much as possible, have a speedy trial, and just a day after the trial, before even they could get the transcripts from the court to the police or justice department, they just deport Tehlirian. And then when they say, oh, the case has not arrived in our hands yet, we are waiting for them. But by the time it reaches them, they say, oh, Tehlirian is not here. It won't make any sense if we file a revision. Again, I think it's understandable why they didn't want to all these political issues to come up and be discussed.
Yeah, and I think the police records, I think they were in some of the ones you showed, but the widow of Talaat wanted to appeal. Mm-hmm. And the prosecutor said, no, we don't want any more about this trial, this case. You get the guy out of the country, deport him, no appeals. Let's just stop talking about this. That's the implication.
And one more thing, if I may add, it is very interesting seeing in Talaat's pocket his ticket to Rome. Mm-hmm. And because it proves that the Armenian intelligence was working perfectly. They knew he was in Rome. And they got him when he got back from Rome, I think, when Tehlirian Soghomon saw him at the train station. So that's also a really good point that these guys on the ground were really working and checking every single step of these people. And we know also the Behadi Shakir, the representative from the Turkish embassy, going to when Tehlirian was held. So he was trying to speak Turkish with him and he was refusing it. But anyway, it really is interesting seeing his, and why would he keep it after these months in his pocket? So anyway, so that's another story.
It is interesting. And I know Bedo and Ara, you've been discussing the question of, is there evidence to show that Tehlirian actually had epilepsy, or was that all just a kind of cover? And in the police records, or at least some of the ones that Osik has seen, and I've seen some of it as well, I mean, there is an examination in this, very interesting to see this pre-trial investigation by the police. You see the lengths they go to try to understand, is he really sick? Did he really, did he really collapse? Was he just saying that? So all of that is fascinating. And also from the point of view of the defense lawyers, we know in the trial, they had 5 doctors testify whether he had free will or not. And maybe they knew that there wasn't going to be an absolute consensus. And so relying on the temporary insanity plea might not work if your doctors are saying, well, he had some free will. He might have had, what you're calling epilepsy, but he had some free will. Well, then what are you going to do? If you have these other arguments that he had reason and that bad things happened to the Armenians, and look at the examples of what the Turks did to the Armenians, you might have some sort of buffer. I don't know that was in their thinking, but it wasn't an open and shut case, the fact that he was ill enough to have been insane when he pulled the trigger. Under the law, insane, Article 51.